This is David with Bestrest Products, home of the cycle pump tire inflator that has a lifetime warranty. Today I'm going to be talking about converting a tubed tire to a tubeless tire, or really tubed rim to a tubeless rim. Why would I want to do that? I've got an 800 GS BMW and it has a tube inside, and every time you get a flat it seems it's in the rear tire. The nail gets kicked up by the front tire, it jumps onto the rear tire, and you get a flat. Well, I've changed flats, I know how to do that pretty quick, but even for me, it's a 30 to 45 minute process. I have to take the wheel off the bike, I have to break the bead, I have to pull out the tube, replace it or repair it, and then put everything back together. A much simpler way of dealing with a tire puncture is when you have tubeless tires, because you simply use a string or a patch or something to plug that hole, reinflate the tire, and off you go. Bestrest has those for sale on our website. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my BMW rim and convert it so that it will now run without a tube inside. I can't just install the tire without a tube because it's going to leak air where all the nipples are, where they penetrate the rim. BMW has a system where their tubeless spokes go to the outside of the rim and they can get away with it, but everybody else, or even on my 800 GS, the spokes come out in the middle and I have to do something to seal that up. Now, one cautionary note, there's some question about whether you can install a tubeless system on a tubed rim. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to say that for my purposes, for my own applications, I'm satisfied with the results and I'm willing to take those risks. If you do this conversion, it's on you. What we have over here is the rim off of my BMW 800. I've already converted this by filling the spoke holes with some special sealant and then covering everything with some special tape. Between the two items, the sealant and the tape, I have sealed any place where the air could penetrate through the rim, or actually from the tire to the outside. We're going to do this now on Steve's bike, and we're going to convert the rim from his 650 GS into a tubeless style rim. I'm going to need a few simple tools to do this. After the wheel is off the bike, I'm going to clean the rim very carefully using a wire brush, whether you use a drill or you use a good old-fashioned Mark I elbow grease, that's up to you. But what you have to do is to clean all of the nooks and crannies in here, because that's where your adhesive is going to want to seal. And if there's dirt or rust or grease in there, it's not going to make a good seal. So you wash it with water very carefully a couple of times. You hit it with a Brillo pad, you hit it with a wire brush, or you hit it with a electric gun with a wire on the end of it. Clean it again, and then finally you're going to spray it with some brake cleaner to flush out anything that might be down in these nooks and crannies. You want to get that all cleaned out. Make sure you don't have any grease on your hands, because that will keep the sealant from attaching to the rim. You're also going to need some sealant, and this is what everybody recommends for this purpose. It's a 3M marine grade adhesive sealant. This stuff cures and it's soft, so as the spokes move or wiggle, you're not going to lose your airtight seal. And a lot of guys will do the conversion just using this sealant, but I like to pad my chances. So what I've done is I've also gotten some special adhesive tape. This stuff is sticky as heck and it won't allow air to pass through it. So I'm going to put the sealant on the rim, but then I'm also going to put a layer of tape over that sealant, just as I've done over here on my 800. So I've doubled my chances of not having any kind of an air leak. And the final thing that you're going to need is you're going to need a new valve stem. You know, the stem on a tube tire comes on the tube. Well, the tube's going away. So you want a stem that you can permanently attach to the rim so that you can now have a true tubeless tire. You can buy 10 millimeter sized diameter tubeless valve stems, but that means you have to drill a bigger hole in your rim where the tube stem came through the rim. I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be the same size so that should I ever need to convert back to a tube, or if I have a tear in my tire, I can still insert a tube into the tire in an emergency. I found these online. They have an 8mm stem. It's the same size as the valve stem itself, and I could get them either in a straight style or in a 90-degree style. I'll probably be installing the straights on these two bikes, but you can get a 90, and that makes inflating your tire much easier because you're not fighting the spokes and the brake rotors. So we'll get this all set up. We'll show you what I do when it comes to the sealing process and how to apply that sealant. So now we're going to start the sealing process. A couple of tips that will make this more helpful. First, before you begin, take a small wrench and just go around to every spoke and tap it to make sure that you're getting the same pinging sound. If it sounds different than the others, that spoke may be loose and I may want to tighten it before I begin. The second thing is, once I've punctured my tube and I put my nozzle on it, I want to trim that nozzle so I've got about 1/8 of an inch hole. I think it's better to go too big than too small, but you may try one spoke hole and find that you need to make some changes. Everything is clean. I've got the rim set up so that it won't move unless I want it to move. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by going around each of these spokes and squeezing caulk or sealant around the corner of each spoke, making a nice little fillet around each one. And then right in the middle, I'm going to take and put this caulk right there, and I'm going to squeeze until it starts to come out of the sides of the screw slot. And that prevents air from coming up past the threaded spoke itself. I've got a little bit of over caulking there. I'll just smooth that off with my finger, wipe that clean, try to get any little blurbs off of there, because I want to have this surface as clean as possible so that my tape will stick to it. And I just start working my way around this rim, doing the 57 spoke holes. One thing I should note is that you can't do this all in one complete process. And the reason is this sealant tends to want to sag a little bit. So I'll do about a half of it, and then I'll let it sit for 15-20 minutes. It will skim over. Ideally let it rest overnight and then do the other half the next day. So this is something that's going to take you a couple of days. Seems like a lot of work, but believe me, when you're on the trail, you're going to thank yourself for every minute in prep and setup that you did on this tire, this wheel assembly. So let's do another one. I go around the entire head of the spoke. I'm pushing the sealant into the corner, and then finally I squeeze out into the spoke hole itself, making sure that I get it down inside. From those first two holes, I determined that the nip that I made on the end of this nozzle was a little bit too small, so I made it bigger. It'll be easier to squeeze out of the tube, easier to get it everywhere that I want it to go. Some of you may not want to go with the tape, and that's fine, in which case you'll use a lot more of this sealant and you'll spread it around almost in a layer, and that's fine too. I didn't come up with this technique. I saw it on a forum, I investigated it, and was satisfied with my findings, and that's why I'm doing this now. I just keep working my way around patiently, spreading the sealant and remembering to fill the center of that spoke hole. And that's what I'm ending up with. I'm going to have kind of a bump on these BMW spokes. Others may have a true concave and it's easier to fill, but in these they stick up above the surface of the rim. But we can make that work with our tape. We'll show that in the next section of the video. I just keep working my way around patiently. Don't give up. The benefits are well worth it. Just before I went off camera last time and I was spinning this, I noticed there's a tiny little hole right here where I didn't get my sealant. It's very important that I close up all those tiny little holes and that I get the sealant down where it belongs. That could be a place where air comes through. No problem. I'll just take and put some more in there, spread it around. And the other comment on this process is that as this stuff cures, it's going to shrink a little bit. So I'm going to come back tomorrow and I'm going to look at every one of these again, and if there's a divot or a dip or someplace where I didn't get it properly filled, I'll put on more sealant, allow it to cure before I go on to the next process, which is putting the tape on. Here we are the next morning, inspecting the work that we did yesterday afternoon. We were able to get all of the sealant onto all of the spokes last night, and we've gone along and added a little bit here and there where we had a small void. We've trimmed off any high spots, and one thing I should mention is if you're going to be separating the time periods between the spreading of the sealant, if you just take a piece of saran wrap and use that as the cap, that will keep it fresh until the next morning. A lot of guys will say, well, this is enough, I can ride this way, yahoo. We like to pad our chances. We're going to add the layer of high strength, flexible, non-permeable tape to this wheel. Just like I did over here on the rim for my 800 GS. Now this rim is a lot wider. It's a 5-inch rim and this is a 4-inch rim. And this space in between the shoulder where the tire bead sets is about 2.5 inches. And because of the curvature, we could easily use this roll of 3-inch wide tape without a problem. But over here on Steve's rim, this tape is too wide. And if I'd used this tape, it would go down into the well, but it would also come up on the shoulder where the tire beads sit. So we're going to have to make some accommodations for that. You can order narrower tape. I think you can get this in 2-inch also. But I ordered a box of this, and this is what we're going to use. So the way we're going to solve this is we're going to cover the shoulder of the rim with some electrical tape. We're basically just going to lay a layer of this tape around the rim, and then when we lay our highest strength adhesive non-permeable tape, it'll come up, it'll stick to that tape, and then we can trim it off using a razor knife. And it's a lot easier to peel off black electrical tape than it is to peel off that high strength tape. The other trick that I'm going to show you is, this can get awkward. I set up kind of a jig here with a couple of squeezy clamps on the edge of the table. And one of the clamps is to just hold this tire iron, and the other one slides through in this fashion. Now when I feed my tape, I don't have to worry about it falling onto the ground or anything like that. Once you peel this off the roll, then the adhesive side is able to stick to anything, and believe me, it will. So we want to do this in one seamless motion. The other thing we're going to do, and this is slightly exaggerated, when we put the tape in, we're not going to stick it to the edges first, because then it's got a gap underneath it in the middle where the spoke holes are. So we have to curl this tape in a U, and we're going to work on sticking it down here, but we don't want it to stick to the sides until we're sure we've got all of the flat part, the well, stuck down. And what I found on using the tape on the 800 is this tape will want to curl like this, and that's great because I can still work my finger inside and I can press it down the way that I need it to. The other thing that we learned is using this stitcher buffer tool that comes from our tire repair kit. It's got a roller on one end and a scuffer on the other. It's used for tube tire repairs. But this roller is perfect for pressing down the tape onto the metal rim and getting it pressed down all the way around every single spoke that's been sealed. We want to make sure that we do that. So we're going to do some more prep and we'll come back and we'll show you this process. To give you an idea of just how sticky this tape is, I took a small piece and put it on my hands, and trying to pull that apart, it's pretty tough. That's exactly what we want, and this stuff is flexible, so it can bend and curve as needed. One note about the rotation of the tire and the way we lay this tape on. This tire is going to be rolling in this direction based on where Steve's sprocket is, direction of the motorcycle. When we lay the tape, we want to lay it so that as the tire is rolling that way, when we bring the tape all the way around, we want it to bond over like this, so that as the tire spins, there's not a tendency for this to come off. It's unlikely that it would, but it's just a good idea to do it that way. So rotation of tire, we've set this up, we're going to start laying the tape, and when we get done, here's my first layer. The second layer is going to come over and bypass it or overlap it by 4 to 5 inches. I've got my tape and my jig. I pull this out and I curl it in a U, and I want to line it up straight so that I don't get going sideways, and I just start pressing the tape in place. And I'm going to work 2 or 3 inches at a time, and as I do that, I'm going to press the tape down with my roller before the edges stick. I don't want these edges to stick because then I can't get the air out. And I just keep working my way down, and the flexibility of the tape allows me to push it into the concave surface of Steve's rim. And I'm pushing it around all of these spoke holes that have the sealant. I just continue this process all the way around till I get to the other side. So I'm just doing an initial spin around this tire, folding that tape over into a U, and getting it down onto the spoke heads, trying not to get it to stick to the sides. And now I'm down to where my first layer has started. So I need to stop at this point and make sure that I get this first layer down and laid out, and then I'll peel off the covering layer and finally put the top layer over it. It's easier if I take off the, or if I cut off the entire roll. And then I'll set that aside. By the way, this one roll of tape was enough to do my tire and Steve's tire. It looks like there's enough on there for one more tire. Going back to my first layer, I can use my finger to press it down, and then I'll use the tool to push out any of the holes, any of the voids that air may have passed or may pass through. And when I finally get that pushed down, then I can curl the tape, the adhesive, or the sealing tape over my black masking tape. So we've got our tape down onto the rim, and we've used our roller tool to go around and roll it down flat and press it hard into the metal. We notice that we got some areas around these raised spoke heads that had air bubbles, and that's inevitable. That's going to happen. So what you do is you take a razor knife and get as far away as you can from the spoke itself, poke it, lift it up a little bit, and then press it out. Think of it as popping a pimple when you were a teenager. That's the best analogy I can give you. Go around carefully, inspect it, use your fingernails and your thumbs to press this all down. We've got this all in place. We've done our overlap. Our overlap is not where the valve stem goes through the rim. We want to avoid that. so we did it several inches away. And then we've got this black tape that we put around the wheel because we don't want to have the adhesive tape here. And I've taken a razor knife and I've scored along that line, and now it's a simple matter of just pulling that off, and now I have a sealed rim and I have not interfered with the sealing edge or shoulder of the rim itself. We've got our tape in place. We've trimmed the edges so we left the shoulder of the bead clean for the tire to make contact with. We've gone around the edges of all of this with our roller tool. We've removed any bubbles. We're confident that we have the best possible seal we can get on these spokes. We've basically converted this to a tubeless rim. At the beginning of the video I talked about valve stems. Most tubeless valve stems are about a 10.5 millimeter hole. We didn't want to drill a bigger hole because if we ever have to put a tube back in for some emergency, we don't want to have an oversized hole. So we ordered special valve stems that are 8 millimeters all the way from top to bottom. And on both Steve and my bike, we're going to put in straight valve stems because we add a Cyclops tire pressure monitoring sensor to the top, and we concluded that having it in the center of the wheel protected that sensor better. But if you don't have those, you can get a right angle valve stem which comes off to the side, which makes filling your tire much easier. In any case, we're using the straight ones. It's got a little O-ring in there, but we're going to enhance that O-ring by adding a bead of sealant in the shoulder of the valve stem. And what this is going to do is seal that stem in place in the rim. And there's a lock nut that goes on top. We put that on to hold it in place. So without getting this sealant on my fingers, I've already cut my hole. I press that on, and the sealant squeezes out on all sides. Then it's a matter of taking my lock nut and tightening that down on the far side, and then it's time to mount the tire, put the valve core in, run it up to 50 pounds, let it sit for a few hours, check the pressure again, make sure that I haven't had any holes, something that I might have missed. If that happened, I'd have to take it off, or I'd look for the hole, put some soapy water on the spoke, see where it's coming through, and if you don't see anything in 24 hours, then you should be good. I'll finish this up with one final layer of sealant around the end of the valve stem. I won't fill that hole because of course that's where the air goes. And then we're going to be done with this project. There we go. Ready to go. The final thing we do before we wrap this up is we take the inner tube liner that originally came off of the wheel that covered the spoke heads. We're going to lay that onto the tire or the wheel assembly just like it was in the beginning. And you say, well, why do that? This is really a protection for that tape so that when you're changing tires you don't hit anything or scuff anything. And also the compression of this strap will help to hold the tape in place. When you take that off the wheel originally, the hole here is very small because the stem for the tube goes through it. We had to enlarge it so that it would fit over the top of the new tubeless valve stem. So we cut that hole a little bit larger, and now I'm going to lay this band over the tire, protecting it and holding my tape in place. This is like a huge rubber band. And there we have it. So what you've learned from this is that you can take a tube tire. Tube's got benefits. You can run lower pressure. But tubeless has bigger benefits in my opinion, and that is when you have a puncture in the field. Fixing a tubeless puncture is simply a matter of using a vulcanizing string. Fixing a tube tire means you've got to take the wheel off the bike, you've got to break the bead, you've got to pull the tube, you've got to make repairs, put everything back in. It's a difference of 5 minutes versus 45 minutes, and in our opinion it's well worth it. Understand that this is a do-it-yourself project. It's not being endorsed by Bestrest products or any specific company. You do it at your own risk. If you're confident with the process, then go for it. If you're not, then that's fine too. Nobody's twisting your arm to do this. After we're done with this video, I'll show you where I got my various supplies. We don't sell anything except that tire tool, the stitcher buffer, but everything else you can buy on the internet, and probably less than 50 bucks for everything all said and done. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed the video. I know it was long, but we're having to teach you a very technical process. This is David with Bestrest Products, home of the cycle pump tire inflator that has a lifetime warranty. We'll see you on the trail.